Certainly is windy out there. Thank you, Matt. A weeks-long investigation into a home drug dealing operation in Springfield led to 5 arrests. When searching a house on Fort Pleasant Avenue, police recovered those 3 guns, one of which is a high-capacity gun, along with fentanyl, heroin, and cocaine. 9 people were detained inside. 4 were released. Joshua Santiago, Giovanni Guzman, and Luis Hernandez of Springfield, as well as Stephanie Britt of Agawam and Alan Provost of Palmer, were all arrested on several charges. Santiago and Hernandez have prior drug-related convictions, while Provost has been previously convicted of assaulting a pregnant woman.